Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, hello and welcome. My name is Dolly and on this channel I discuss all things spooky, haunted, cursed, possessed. I also do paranormal investigations on a Sunday evening at 9 p.m. where I am joined by my partner Steve. I also tell ghost stories or report on ghostly sightings. So if that is something that you are interested in, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So today I have a few cases for you and they are cursed or haunted items. So first up I have the cursed mobile phone number. Now I know a lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, a cursed mobile phone number, can that really be true? Well yes, in fact the story actually is true. For the number being cursed or not, that's up to you, for you to decide, but the actual story is true. And this story takes us back to Bulgaria in 2010. Entel, a mobile phone provider, decided to withdraw this certain number because it seemed that everybody that had this number seemed to die unexpectedly. Now I am going to put the phone number up for you guys on the screen now so you can actually take a look at the number. I'm a bit superstitious so I don't want to read the number out. In 2001, this phone number was issued to Vladimir Gashnov. Now I hope I've pronounced that right. And he was issued this number, but unfortunately he unexpectedly passed away at the young age of 48 from cancer. Then in 2003, this number was then assigned to a Konstantin Dimitrov. Now I hope I've pronounced that right. Now he was actually a mafia boss and he was out dining when unfortunately he was assassinated and he did die there at the scene. He was only 33 years old. After this, the number was only ever assigned to one more person, and that was Konstantin Dishlev. I hope I've pronounced that right once again. And he was a businessman and he also was a mafia boss. Now, while he was standing outside a restaurant, he was also assassinated. So of course, after all these deaths, the mobile phone provider just said, that's it, that's enough, we're never going to give this mobile number to anybody else again. And they just took it off their register. Now, was this actually a cursed number or was this purely just a coincidence? Or was it simply the fact that once you was assigned that number, your fate was then sealed? Up next, we have The Foot Book by Dr. Seuss. Published in 1968, this book is said to be one of the most cursed objects in the world. This book belonged to a family, and in the family was a little girl who used to love reading this book. But every time she would read the book, the family claimed they could hear whispers of children. At first, they just didn't know where it was coming from, but then they soon noticed it was every time the little girl would read the book. They also claimed that they could just feel unseen eyes watching them. Again, this was only when the book was only being read. After some time, the family began to feel really uneasy with this children's book, so they decided to bring in a paranormal investigator who then decided to do some more research on the book. And what they found was very chilling. The paranormal investigator actually discovered that this book belonged to another family. Now, unfortunately, this other family were all murdered. They also noticed that there was a stain on the book, but when they took a closer look at it, the stain was actually blood from one of the murder victims. After the paranormal investigator found out all these findings, he decided to report back to the family. Now, as you can understand, the family didn't want anything else to do with this book, so they kindly donated it to the West Virginia National Museum of the Paranormal, where this book has never been read out loud since. Up next, we have the Anguished Man painting. Now, this painting does have a very disturbing background, and I'm going to be talking about some sensitive content that may trigger some people. So if you feel that you may be triggered by what I'm about to talk about, please just wind on to the next cursed item. The owner of this painting, Sean Robinson, claims that he inherited this painting from his grandmother. Now, what his grandmother said next is truly disturbing. She said that this painting was painted by an unknown artist who actually used his own blood and mixed it in with the oils to paint this portrait. After he had painted this portrait, he unfortunately decided to unalive himself. Now, I find that really sad that he decided to do one last painting and then he felt the need to do that. But the story doesn't end there. After Sean inherited the portrait, he decided to hang it up in one of his rooms in his house. After he'd hung the portrait up, he started to notice doors would just bang randomly on their own. He would hear footsteps late at night. And what's more disturbing is he said he woke up to see a man staring back at him. Now, he also says that sometimes he hears moans which sound like they're coming from the portrait itself. Sean Robinson from Cumbria, England, still owns this painting to this day. Last but no means least is the story of the cursed Carl Pruitt's grave. Now, Carl was a local carpenter from Kentucky. And after being at work all day, he just wanted to go home and see his wife. Now, his wife would normally greet him in the kitchen as she prepared his dinner. But on this particular day, his wife wasn't in the kitchen, so he continued to look for her in the house. Now, he found her upstairs in the bedroom with another man. As you can imagine, this angered Mr. Pruitt, and he just went into a blind fit of rage. Now, the lover managed to escape as he jumped out the window and just ran off. But unfortunately, his wife wasn't so lucky. Carl grabbed a chain and put it round her neck and killed her. Carl, after realising what he'd actually done, started to actually feel guilty. He started to feel some remorse that what he had done to his wife was just awful. So he decided to reach for a pistol and unalive himself. Now, as you can imagine, the family of the wife were absolutely devastated, and most of all, they were very angry with Carl. So they said, "I do not want Carl's headstone nowhere near our beloved headstone." So what they decided to do was make sure that the wife was buried far away from Carl. Now, this is where the story starts to take a very strange and dark twist. Now, the locals would notice strange goings on with Carl's headstone. Locals would say that the grass would grow in round circles as if it resembled a chain. Locals would say the grass would grow in round patterns resembling a chain. They also said that Carl's headstone would go all discoloured and round circle patterns would appear on his headstone. Now, stories started to circulate that his headstone was actually cursed, and the locals got a bit nervous and actually wanted the headstone to be removed. But the authorities would just say, no, it's not cursed, and they wouldn't remove the headstone. A local teenager called James Collin decided to take him and his friends to the headstone. Now, for some reason, James decided to throw a rock at the headstone, and this, of course, chipped the headstone. In fear, the boys decided to ride off on their bikes because they were scared that they would get in trouble by the groundkeeper. As James pedalled off, his bike began to pick up some speed. Unfortunately, he collided with a tree, and his chain on his bike then became loose, wrapped around his neck and strangled him to death. As you can imagine, James's mother becomes so distraught over the death of her son that she actually decided that she was going to go to Carl's grave and she was going to smash it into pieces. So she did. She took an axe to the gravesite and she decided to smash Carl's headstone into pieces. Now, after she had done that, nobody really heard of her and people started to get worried because nobody had seen her. So someone actually went round to do a welfare check on her house. Once they had arrived at the house, they went into the back garden and they could see James's mother had been strangled by her own washing line. But the story gets even stranger because Carl's headstone, who locals had witnessed the lady smash, was all back intact with no marks on it. Another story is of that of a farmer who was riding his horse and carriage when he come across Carl's headstone. For some unknown reason, he decided to grab for his revolver and shoot at the headstone. Now, of course, this loud noise obviously triggered the horses and they decided to bolt it. Now, the farmer was thrown from the carriage and he was found on the floor with the trace chain from the horses wrapped around his neck. After the deaths, the locals got so concerned that they just wanted the headstone removed. Now, the authorities wouldn't remove this headstone, so they just had to live with this headstone in this cemetery. But a local man called Arthur said that the headstone wasn't cursed, and he wanted to prove this to all the locals. So he decided to get a hammer and smash the grave. Now, all the locals wanted to see this, so they gathered round and watched Arthur get a large hammer and start to smash the headstone. Now, by this time, a massive crowd had gathered, but all they heard was a loud scream. But by the time the locals had got to Arthur, he was found with a chain that was hanging on the fence, wrapped around his neck, and he had been strangled with it. Unfortunately, he had died, but when the locals looked over at the headstone, once again, it was intact. Now, this baffled the locals because they could see they were watching him smash this headstone. But for some reason, the headstone was back all intact. As you can imagine, by this point, the locals were absolutely terrified. But that was short-lived because in 1958, the cemetery had a redevelopment to make way for strip mining. Carl's remains had now been concealed underneath all the concrete. Just before the redevelopment of the cemetery, all the other graves were dug up and they were moved somewhere else so that their loved ones could be buried. Locals also speculate that Carl was one of the people that was redug up and buried somewhere else. So just be careful the next time you visit a cemetery and you come across an unmarked grave. Could it be the cursed grave of Carl Pruitt? So guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you found these stories just as interesting as I have. Please let me know down in the comments below if you own a cursed object. But until the next time guys, good night.